You can't tell me that being ethnically from a destabilized country, that doesn't feel a whole lot like coming from a dysfunctional home. And this isn't something that I know academically, but my gut feeling is that both experiences show up in the same way in the body, that immigrant trauma shows up as attachment trauma. The destabilized government feels a lot like the absent father, someone who was supposed to provide, protect, plan, and hold that future steady for you, but who doesn't show up. And so you grow up learning how not to rely, hyper alert, adaptable, and you grow up way too fast, learning to navigate the world on your own without being held. And the land, my God, the land feels like the mother. She's beautiful and generous, but exhausted and exploited. She gives and gives, even as she's taken from. And you love her deeply, but you watch her struggle to raise you with what little she's allowed to keep. If you leave her, that feels like betrayal. If you stay, then it feels like you're being suffocated. And so there's that guilt stitched into whatever choice you decide to make. So when we immigrate, or as children of immigrants, it feels a lot like we're adopted. The new country, she feeds us, schools us, gives us opportunity and structure. And we're grateful genuinely. But gratitude doesn't take away or erase that feeling of being like a permanent guest. There's something about ethnically being from a destabilized country that affects how we experience belonging. Like that feeling of living in someone else's house, careful not to be too loud, too much, or too different, trying to find that right balance of being ourselves but without annoying our adopted families, being loved but conditionally. And then when xenophobia and every other phobia flares up and the rhetoric around that hardens, the house begins to feel tense, and it's like we're walking on eggshells, and it solidifies that quiet fear that we were carrying, that this home too might be taken away from us. And then there's a particular kind of envy that creeps in when we see individuals who are ethnically from stable countries flourishing. And I wouldn't call it jealousy, but it's a kind of wonder, a particular kind of envy, like who would we have been if we were held and loved by a system that worked and protected us like a father figure? Like who would we have been if we were able to flourish to our full potential without having to waste our energy constantly fighting to belong? Like if we didn't have to constantly worry about the roots and the soil that we're growing into, whether, if, or when it's going to reject us, and we were simply just allowed to flourish, like who would we have been? So much of our life force goes into questions that others never have to ask, like where do I belong? Am I allowed to take up space? Which parts of me do I have to change, tone down, defend? Instead of blooming, we're out here trying to stabilize ourselves. Instead of flowering and flourishing, we're out here fighting for the right to survive and thrive in the soil while fighting off rhetoric that we're weeds and being treated as such. Growing up, it feels a lot like we're those flowers who grow up in concrete. We're resilient, yes, but never supported. Who would we have been if our existence didn't demand a fight? If our right to be here was never up for debate? If we could live without proving, without bracing, without apologizing? A lot of us in the diaspora carry along with us a grief we don't even have the language for. Our wandering isn't ingratitude, but that grief is for a life where safety came first, where our lives weren't political or our existence wasn't political, and we fully just got to flourish in an environment which nurtured our needs, and we got to flourish to our full potential, where our growth didn't demand resilience and we were offered rest.